Good afternoon, members. I call Committee of Supply Section A to order. We are meeting today to continue the consideration of the budget estimates of the Ministry of Agriculture and Food. I now recognize the Minister to make the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Vote number 12, resolve that a sum not exceeding $95,004,000 be granted to His Majesty to defray the expenses of the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Ministry operations dated March 31st, 2025.
Thank you, Minister. I now recognize the member for Delta South.
Thank you. Madam Chair. I think when we left off yesterday, we're waiting for an answer.
Very good, thank you. And you have an answer. Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I'd like to begin this afternoon by responding to the member's final question from last evening regarding the Cowichan Estuary. First, I need to clarify the timelines for the member. The Cowichan Estuary Restoration Project was originally funded as part of the 2019 BC Salmon Restoration and Innovation Fund, or BCSRIF. Decisions about which projects were funded by this joint federal-provincial program were made by fisheries experts from the province and from Fisheries and Oceans Canada. This program and its successor, BCSRIF2, represent a combined investment of nearly $500 million in protecting and restoring wild salmon in British Columbia, and has supported projects from community groups, commercial fishers, sport fishers, First Nations, and conservation groups. Upon receiving funding, the landowners, in this case the BC Nature Trust and Ducks Unlimited, had to apply for non-farm use to the ALC in order to remove dikes in the estuary. And it is my understanding that they have made an application, and the Commission will be making a decision at some point in the coming months. The member is correct that I was one of the signatories to the Coxsila Watershed Planning Agreement last May, but the member incorrectly mixes up the planning process with this project. As I just noted, the project was approved for funding well before the Watershed Planning Agreement was signed. More importantly, while the Watershed Planning Agreement and the Cowichan Estuary Project are related in that they both involve the Coxsila and Cowichan rivers, the projects are independent. The member correctly pointed out that on October 5th of last year, the leader of the Conservative Party asked me a question about, and I quote, "The NDP is scheduled to destroy over 100 acres of the Dinsdale farmland, taking it out of the agricultural land reserve to create a marsh," unquote. I acknowledge that the leader of the Conservative Party question was confusing. I didn't immediately connect the Dinsdale farm with the Cowichan Estuary Restoration Project because, as the member knows, the land has been owned by the Nature Trust and Ducks Unlimited for a quarter century. More confusing was the fact that the leader of the Conservative Party referred to a letter I had written, and I incorrectly assumed that he was referring to a letter that I had written to him. In fact, the leader of the Conservative Party was referring to correspondence I had received from the BC United Agriculture Critic, the member, and to the response I sent him. I readily acknowledge that the question from the leader of one party about correspondence from a member of another, supposedly different party, threw me off. Finally, yesterday, the member opposite asked me, and I quote, "My question, I have heard that one of the reasons they want to flood this farmland is to grow an indigenous vegetable called camas. My question to the minister is, can you explain to me what camas is?" Unquote. As I understand it, camas is indeed an indigenous root vegetable which grows in the Pacific Northwest. I do not believe that it is being cultivated commercially in British Columbia, and while it may factor into the plans for the Cowichan Estuary Restoration Project, I cannot confirm that this is the case. That said, I'm a bit puzzled by the member's question, in that he appears to imply that the corn and grasses grown in the Cowichan Estuary to support the dairy sector are more important than Indigenous vegetables that have been harvested by the Coast Salish people for thousands of years and which is an important part of their food security. If the member truly believes that Indigenous food security is unimportant, then I would encourage him to say so on record. Similarly, yesterday the member said, and I quote, "If I was the Minister of Agriculture, I would be embarrassed to stand up and say that I would look after the little fish or whatever's coming down the Cowichan or Coxsila River versus saving 110 acres of prime farmland," unquote. Putting aside the fact that the critic for agriculture should know that fish are in fact food. I can assure the member that I am proud to help and protect Cowichan River Chinook salmon that are vitally important to sport fishers, First Nations, commercial fishers, the southern resident orcas, and I am disappointed that the member opposite doesn't share my view. Thank you.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, let's go back, Madam Chair, to yesterday, and I'll go back to the mandate letter that was sent by the Premier to the Minister. And Madam Chair, once again, as Minister, your job will be to support farmers, ranchers, and seafood producers in the critical work that they do for all of us to ensure food security for British Columbians by establishing policies to use our agricultural land wisely and increase production. Now, Madam Chair, yesterday, going back to Hansard, the Minister stated, and I quote, "In other words, the Cowichan River is in trouble. Last year, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans predicted the returns of 6,500 Chinook, and the actual returns were over 21,000. The Cowichan River is a success story for how communities can restore and protect salmon. The estuary project will further that important work." So my question, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister, if it says that the estuary project, she states, the Minister states that the estuary project will further that important work, could the Minister explain how losing just over 100 acres of prime agricultural land, growing food and feed for livestock in the Cowichan Bay area would be less important than breaching the dike and flooding that 100 acres of land with salt water? So my question is, the estuary project will further that important work. Can you explain how the estuary project of over 100 acres of flooded land of salt water will be more beneficial than growing food? As the Minister of Agriculture, I would think it would be her #1 importance is growing food and food security in British Columbia.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, land use is about balance and trade-offs. The project proponents have made an application to the ALC, and I'm not, of course, privy to those details, but as I understand it, they're looking at finding ways to enhance both agriculture and protecting fish.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it took 6 minutes for that answer. Madam Chair, thank you. My next question would be, as the Minister of Agriculture, at the highest level of agriculture in the province of BC, to all the farmers, the ranchers, staff, if you are asked a question at the Agricultural Gala, your priority, a yes or no answer, your priority is preserving 110 acres of prime farmland in Cowichan Bay.
Member, can you remember to go through the chair,
Through the chair,
please?
the
Thank you so
Gerald
much.
Pullman is growing vegetables and feed for cattle, as opposed to breaching a dike and flooding that 110 acres with salt water and forever creating a useless estuary that will not grow food for cattle.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Again, these are land use decisions, and there are trade-offs. Cowichan Estuary, as I said yesterday, is unique and not useless. The Cowichan River is a key indicator stream on Vancouver Island, and the Chinook matter to me like everything else. It's all important to me.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my answer is Chinook are more important than your role as the Agriculture Minister to preserve farmland in British Columbia. That's my take from this. I'd like to move on, but I just want to, for the record, Madam Chair, to know that I'm passionate about this project. I'm passionate about Gerald Pullman, a good friend of mine, dairy farmer, who's been farming this property for 35 acres now. I'm passionate about 2 town halls I've gone to in the last 8 months on Vancouver Island with over 200 people that showed up. People are livid on Vancouver Island about the possibility of this dike being breached and this beautiful piece of farmland. By the way, Madam Chair, on either side of this piece of farmland is already, you can see the old original fences where they've been allowed to breach the dike. They've already flooded and created an estuary on either side of this 110 acres. Totally nothing going on, nothing whatsoever. It's just dead, salty marshland. And that's what's going to happen to this 110 acres. Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me say that. I'll move on. Some more ALC questions. As I mentioned earlier, Bill 52 back in 2018 was going to solve a few problems. It was going to solve, according to the original Minister of Agriculture, it was going to solve the price of farmland in British Columbia and stop that from rising. But it was going to solve monster homes being built in British Columbia. As I said the other day, you can travel to Steveston in Richmond, you can travel South Surrey, South Langley, all the side roads of Abbotsford and Aldergrove, and I'm seeing massive monster homes that I know for sure are over 500 meters squared. Monster homes, and my question through you to the Minister is, what is happening with these monster homes that continue to be built when legislation was brought in to cap them at 500 meters squared?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. We went over this, I think, last time as well in the last estimate section, and I'm just going to repeat what was said at that point. The specific houses the member is referring to may have received approvals and permits prior to when Bill 52 restrictions came into effect. We understand that it takes time from the issuance of an authorization to the start of construction can vary from local government to local government, in particular if the authorizations involve preloading of unstable soils. But if you do have any concerns about specific sites, please send us the details so that we can follow up.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think for 2 or 3 agriculture estimates in a row, Madam Chair, I've been given the same answer, that perhaps they had their permits prior to the legislation being passed, which would have been 6 years ago. And the houses are still being built now, so I really have a really tough time with that continuous answer each year. Something has to be looked into at the municipal level, with inspectors or with the Agricultural Land Commission level as to why these monster homes are still being built on ALR land in South Surrey, South Langley, Abbotsford, etc. Madam Chair, through you to the Minister, I would like to know several properties that I had mentioned that have been taken out of the Agricultural Land Reserve for some very interesting projects. I get email after email of frustrated people that have been turned down from simple things that they needed done with ALC permission, but were turned down and not granted. And yet, on Highway 15, just north of Cloverdale, at the corner of Highway 15, or better known as 176th Street, and South Fraser Way, or Fraser Highway, I should say, is 30 acres that's just recently taken out of the ALR to become covered in gravel, a maintenance yard for the new SkyTrain rail that's going to go from Surrey into Langley. I would like to know how this has happened and how there's been no public information. And I sort of found out secretly through the dairy farmer across the street that this has happened.
Minister.
Thank you. A new operations and maintenance center is what's going on there, which is an essential part of the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain project. It's needed to store, maintain, and repair the SkyTrain vehicles that will service 16 kilometers of track and needs to be close to the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain alignment. It was determined that the best site is this 14-acre plot of land on the Fraser Highway that was in the Agricultural Land Reserve, and the ALR was not used for agriculture activities for close to 30 years. The province is investing $7 million to offset the removal of this piece of land from the ALR. And the Ministry of Finance is working with the City of Surrey and representatives of the local agricultural community to determine how that $7 million could best be spent to improve agriculture and wildlife habitat in the area. And these discussions are ongoing and could perhaps improve drainage in the area, which I understand is an issue, and habitat improvement.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that answer. So I'll come back one more time, Madam Chair. So if I had a piece of land that was 30 acres and nothing's been done with it for, I forget how many years you had mentioned. How many? 30 years. And I'm a farmer that owns that piece of land, but it's poor land. Would I be eligible to apply and have that taken out of the ALR for my personal use?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. The answer to your question is no. A private property owner has to actually go through their municipality, make an application so that the municipality could, on their behalf, make an application to the ALC, but not directly to the ALC, just to clear that. And just as an aside, with respect to the acreage in question that was removed, MOTI identified, Ministry of Transportation identified the land, and certainly Cabinet made the ultimate decision, but it was based, of course, on great public interest, because, of course, this garage would serve a very integral part of operating the SkyTrain service.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm aware of the time that we have, but I'll just quickly ask, the application to the Land Commission has to be done through a local government or through a First Nations. So who actually made the application to the Land Commission to have this 30 acres removed?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. This particular order was done by Cabinet, and no ALC involvement whatsoever. This is an order that happened through the Environment and Land Use Act, and we have that mechanism available, so it doesn't involve the Agricultural Land Commission.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that answer. So let's skip up to Chilliwack to 8190 Brannock Place. And there's an energy drink called Red Bull, and I think everybody knows about Red Bull. I've never actually drank Red Bull, but we all know about it. So how did this piece of property, I'm guessing, Madam Chair, it's a roughly 10 acres, but from the satellite view of it, it's not a piece of land that sat fallow for 30 years. It was actively tilled, what I can see in the satellite view. How did this 10-acre parcel come out of the agricultural land reserve for a Red Bull energy plant drink to be built on that farmland?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to Red Bull, in 2004, the ALC approved the non-farm use of 35 hectares of land adjacent to Highway 1 in the city of Chilliwack for food and beverage processing in the ALR, subject to the registration of a restrictive covenant limiting the use of the land to agriculture and food, beverage processing facilities only. And so this remains in perpetuity, and some of the other businesses that are there alongside where Red Bull will go is, of course, the Molson's, Coors, Fraser Valley Brewery, Berry Hill Foods, Sandell Foods, and Five Corners Meats, which is also known as Donald's Fine Foods.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with tongue in cheek, I guess we could assume then that the manufacturing of an energy drink is some sort of a food source that's allowed to be built on agricultural land, just like I suppose beer and other businesses there that are doing processing. My next question, Madam Chair, is regarding enforcement officers with the ALR. I would like to know how many enforcement officers we have, and I'd like to know why. This drives me absolutely crazy. I travel up and down the Fraser Valley a lot, and we're seeing land in the ALR driving by a horse facility, an equine facility, and we all know what an indoor riding facility is. Just drive along 16th Avenue at around 240th Street in South Surrey, South Langley, and you can see that some of these properties have been purchased and completely turned an equestrian center into nothing but truck parking. You see that everywhere in the Fraser Valley is truck parking on ALR land. And it's so obvious. Nobody's even trying to hide it anymore. So what is being done about truck parking on our ALR lands?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. There are 6 enforcement officers are part of the ALC, and the ALC responds, of course, based on complaints like bylaws, of course, complaint-driven. We have a number of active cases and files that involve truck parking, and every complaint that the ALC receives is followed up on, and enforcement action is taken when necessary.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that answer. I would suggest that if I was a compliance officer for the ALC, any kind of a casual drive, even to go for a Sunday afternoon drive in Abbotsford, Aldergrove, South Langley, all you have to do is look out your window and you're going to see what I'm talking about. It's so obvious. Madam Chair, thank you, and thank you for that answer. Let's move on to Bill 52, which was going to solve the problem with mega homes in British Columbia, but it was also going to solve the issue of illegal dumping on our farmlands. So, front page of the Vancouver Sun, one of the biggest articles I've seen for agriculture in a long time is illegal dumping in Hatzic Valley. What has been done about illegal dumping in Hatzic Valley, and have we curbed illegal dumping on agricultural land based on the legislation of Bill 52?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Bill 52 created a process for the authorization of accepting fill, basically. But I agree, Hatzic Valley is extremely challenging, and I'm deeply frustrated by the activity. And just as an example, over the past year, the ALC has conducted, just in Hatzic Valley, 137 on-site inspections. They've issued 18 stop work orders. They've issued 35 notices of contravention, 3 remediation orders, and will likely issue additional remediation orders. Since that time, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the Ministry of Forests also has been involved because the unauthorized dumping appears to have impacted wetlands and watercourses. And because I'm so frustrated about this, I have spoken to staff about finding multi-agency solutions to this.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister for that answer. It just occurred to me that that's your backyard, Hatzic Valley. I'm very familiar with that. I used to deal with lots of dairy farmers out in Dewdney and Desroches and Hatzic Valley. My next question to do with ALC as well, and I'm not trying to be pushy or whatever, but it continues to be confusing. I was on Delta City Council, and I'm still very involved with chatting with our head of our planning department, and I just want to get a straight answer from the Land Commission representative here today about houses on our farmland. You know, how many are we actually allowed? Is it the local government that decides the size of the second house if you have a principal residence? Is it the local government or is it the Land Commission that makes that decision on the size of the second house? These are just some of the questions. Are you allowed a second house? Are you allowed a third house? Would the third house be allowed? What size could it be? It just seems to be confusion. Getting a straight answer for people that come to me about this exact question. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So the first house of no more than 500 square meters can include a secondary suite. The second house, which can be no more than 90 square meters or 186 meters squared, permitted. 3 or more houses, you need an application to the commission, and size restrictions can be a condition of the decision. And so between April 1st, 2023 and December 31st, 2023, the ALC received 4 requests for 3 or more residences, and 2 were approved. But just a caveat, that local government still has the legal authority to further restrict size, because sometimes there are rules about thirds houses or second house sizes.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that answer. So Madam Chair, to further our conversation about house size, 90 meters squared is 970 square feet. I don't know how many people in this room live in a house, if you're married, work on a farm, you have 3 kids, that live in 970 square feet. So my question through you, Madam Chair, what are I'll call it a variance, how do you go about asking for a variance through the Land Commission or through your local government to make your second residence obviously bigger than 970 square feet?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to asking for something that doesn't exist in the set of rules, you must make an application to the ALC to get that size modified, and it has to be necessary for farm use, just to keep that in mind. But if you have something specific, please reach out and let us know so we can help you work through it.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that answer. I'll be a little bit cynical right now. First of all, I'll go back and you know, my father was chairman of the Agricultural Land Commission, and we discussed for many, many years about preserving farmland, and I've traveled the province enough to see that I am a real believer in the next generation, that if we want the next generation to say, yeah, I want to be a farmer, I want to be a rancher with my family, but I don't want to commute 20 kilometers and live in downtown Smithers in an apartment because I can't have a second or third home on my parents' dairy farm outside of Smithers, if you get what I'm saying. If we're going to have the next generation come along, and lots of these farming families have 3, 4, 5 kids, and a lot of them want to be involved in the farm. We've got to let them be able to build homes on the farm. And I'm not saying cover up black soil with a new home. I'm saying let's put it on the original farm home plate. It was probably put down like our farm 100 years ago. There was barns back then for hogs and barns for chickens, and now they're just gravel. Well, let's put a house on that part of the home plate. But what I'm trying to get to, now I'm going to forget what I was even going to get at, but we asked about a variance, which we just talked about, and I talked about the next generation. So what I was going to say comically and with tongue in cheek is, with new legislation that's come down from the Minister of Housing, in British Columbia on any given city lot, you can tear down a single-family home and build a fourplex, or if the lot's big enough, you can build a sixplex. So in the words of my friend Mike DeYoung, he got up one day and said, you can actually build more homes on a city lot in British Columbia than you can on a 100-acre farm in British Columbia. And that just doesn't make any sense to me. Especially if we have the next generation coming along that should not have to commute and live in a townhouse or a condominium in town somewhere and commute to their dairy farm or their horse farm where it's 24 hours a day supervision on a dairy farm with animals that are calving, or horses that are foaling, or animals that are sick. I'd like to move on right now and talk about Brunswick Point. Do you know about, Madam Chair, thank you, through you to the Minister, hopefully you know about Brunswick Point. I have brought forward 2 private members' bills to preserve Brunswick Point. So quickly to talk about the history of it, in 1969, the Socred government expropriated 4,000 acres of farmland in West Delta for the building of the container port, the coal port back in those days. All but 600 acres was sold back to the farm families that had enough money to purchase their farms back. But 600 acres at the mouth of the Fraser River Canoe Pass never got sold back to the farm families. They would like to buy it back. To this day, the 5 families are still there leasing back farmland that used to be theirs that they owned. So through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to know where the government stands on my private members' bills on the preservation of Brunswick Point, to keep it in, and this is the title of my bill, to keep Brunswick Point, 600 acres of the best potato growing land in British Columbia, in agriculture in perpetuity forever by passing my private members' bill. I'd like to know where the minister stands on Brunswick Point in Delta.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. The Brunswick Point land, of course, continues to be owned by the province of British Columbia. It also remains in the Agricultural Land Reserve, and the province is in continued conversation with Tsawwassen First Nations regarding these properties. However, the member's motion would contravene the treaty with Tsawwassen First Nation, who continue to have the right of first refusal.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you to the minute, I hate to, we don't have a lot of time, but so my motion is to return the Brunswick Point lands back to the original farm owners, or the farmers that are currently renting or leasing that land, to be able to continue that leasing of the land or sell it back to the original families, but also to keep that land in agriculture in perpetuity. In other words, right next door, as we know, a treaty with Tsawwassen First Nations, and I'm fine with that. They're doing very well, but they have a huge housing development. They have warehouses, Amazon, etc. I would like to see this 600 acres remain as agricultural land in perpetuity. So my question through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister, could you explain what you meant by right of first refusal, and does that compete with the opportunity for the province to sell this land back to the original owners?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to the Brunswick Point lands, the member is aware that the Tsawwassen First Nation final agreement signed by the former government gives the right of first refusal to those lands in the Tsawwassen First Nations. And as I understand it, the right of first refusal actually means that they have to the province has to satisfy its duties to the Tsawwassen First Nations.
At this time, I'm going to call a 10-minute recess. Oh,
When your replacement comes.
that's not my, okay. Okay, go ahead, member, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. One more issue related to Bill 52, land issues. So, three things we're going to, by the legislation of Bill 52, we're going to solve all sorts of problems in British Columbia. One was dealing with mega homes. I don't think that's been dealt with through legislation. Illegal dumping on farmland, I've seen that in Columbia Valley, up in Cultus Lake area, Hatzick Valley. I don't really think we've solved that. It was also going to, it was going to hold the increase in farm values in British Columbia. But in 2017, our farm values were rising by 2.7%. And just last year, we led the country, all of Canada, by 18.1% rise in farmland values. So can you explain to me why our farmland values are suddenly rising more than any other province in Canada?
Minister.
Hello. Hi, welcome, Chair. As the member knows, land prices across BC have increased substantially in recent years, which of course includes agricultural land. And this is due in part to speculation on farmland and the hope among some that they may be able to pull land from the ALR for housing or industrial uses. And we know that increasing the things that are permitted uses on the ALR, like increased housing, ultimately increases the value and price of the land. And just like land for residential properties, we've seen just recently a slight dip in the value, likely owing to rising interest rates.
Members, given that there's a change in seats here, and I understand everybody's been sitting for a while, I'd like to suggest a 10-minute recess at this point. All right, thank you, members. Calling the committee back to order. It's the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, and we are on vote 12. Member?
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just speak for a little bit about greenhouses. And in Delta, we have some fabulous greenhouses, and I quite appreciate what they do, the money they've spent, the risks they've taken, such high technology with our greenhouses. And, you know, unlike our dirt farmers that can only farm 6 or 7 months of the year here in British Columbia, they get to farm almost 12 months of the year. However, I'm going to see if I can lump two things together. One is on housing. So if your average dairy farmer or cattle rancher or whatever can have basically two houses, principal residence and a second smaller 970 square, and hopefully, you know, cross fingers and hope to apply to get a third one, the greenhouse industry can, like that, overnight, Mr. Chair, put up housing for 100 migrant workers at the greenhouse operation. We see this all the time. So I'm just wondering if I could explain through the minister, through you, Mr. Chair, the discrepancy on the conventional dirt farmer versus the greenhouse operation with the ability to house workers or family members on that property. My second question to do with greenhouses is kind of more of a statement. On my particular road, on Ladner Trunk Road at 88th Street, is the original Huff Farm, and Brent Kelly had been planting potatoes in this 30-acre field, and, you know, beautiful black soil, great potatoes, and the greenhouse operator right next door purchased this farm and let the potato field sit fallow for 2 years. It just grew nothing but weeds, which was a bit unfortunate. But my question is, now the greenhouse operation is going to build another greenhouse on this 30 acres, but they have to truck in roughly 3 to 4 feet of fill. So they're going to cover this entire black soil, 30 acres that was growing potatoes, with fill material before they begin growing their greenhouse. So my question through you, Mr. Chair, to the minister, what is the process through the Land Commission to get the fill permits for that much fill to cover 30 acres of land before building the greenhouses on it?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Any farm building that sits on an area of 1,000 square meters needs to submit a notice of intent to the Commission to confirm that the fill is for a permitted use, which includes greenhouses, dairy barns, hog barns, riding arenas, all of it, not just greenhouses.
Member Delta South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we sort of got that answer. I guess my dad and I used to agree that, and don't get me wrong, I love our greenhouses. They grow a beautiful product in Delta and whatnot. We've always thought, why can't we look to getting our greenhouses into hilly land that's maybe rocky up in Alder Grove, or maybe some poor quality land that has some, even in Delta, we have some poor quality land that hasn't been farmed in 50 years that I can remember. Like, that's where we should put our greenhouses. But that's another story for another day, I suppose. We're going to move on now, Mr. Chair, to some water issues, which is a huge issue in British Columbia with the drought and fires and whatnot that we've had. Mr. Chair, over 80% of the province remains in drought level 4 or 5 through the winter months currently, which means we're in for another high demand summer for water in the agricultural sector. The Watershed Security Strategy, which is supposed to be completely launched in early 2024, envisions the potential for agriculture water reserves. My question through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister, does the Ministry of Agriculture support this vision, and will it support the adoption of a regulation formalizing the process for creating an agriculture water reserve within the Watershed Security Strategy?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. In January of 2023, my colleague, the Minister of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship, launched a new $100 million watershed security strategy for British Columbia with the intention of promoting healthy and secure watersheds all across the province. The ministry issued an intentions paper and is seeking input from a broad cross-section of stakeholders about how we can best protect our watersheds and ensure an abundant water supply for all user groups. The importance of water for food security is clearly identified and woven in throughout this intentions paper. My ministry has been an active participant in this process to ensure that the needs of the agriculture sector are heard and understood, and we're also working to ensure that the BC Agriculture Council's Water Security and Management Committee is linked to that process going forward.
Member Delta South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that answer. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister, I want to tell a little story. Last Labor Day weekend, there was an emergency meeting called in the Westwold Community Hall, and there was 200 irate farmers / ranchers. There was myself and 7 of my colleagues, and I left at 4:30 in the morning to get to this 9 a.m. meeting to listen to their disdain with these officers in these navy blue outfits dressed as police with guns on their belts that were going in and shutting down these farmers from irrigating towards the end of the summer, ruining the opportunity for getting their vegetable crops harvested or their alfalfa crops grown for a 3rd or 4th cutting. These are serious issues with the groundwater licensing system in BC as farmers continue to experience year-long delays in their well registrations. This past year, we saw farms in 4 large areas of BC's agriculture sector cut off by the province in the worst drought we've seen in over a decade, during a severe feed shortage, very last minute, leaving farmers and ranchers in the lurch, losing trust in government to manage water. Now, Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister, we were both attending the Agriculture Gala in Abbotsford right at the end of January. And the Premier of BC got up and made a speech that night. And I was at the back of the room and I couldn't hear all of it, but I did hear him say that farmers wouldn't have their water cut off this summer and that he was going to make sure that this wasn't an election issue and things were going to change. 2 days later, I pick up the Country Life newspaper, which every farmer and rancher reads, and on the front page it says, fines for illegal use of irrigation water are going up to $500,000. Will farmers in Westwold, Vancouver Island, and other places be told to shut off their water or get these substantial fines in the summer of 2024?
Minister of Agriculture and Food.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Member. With respect to enforcement, please direct those questions to Walrus, because they're the ones that have set the penalties and things. And you're right, it's likely going to be a difficult year this year, looking at the snowpack, 66%, that's the last I checked. But this is what we're doing as a ministry. So the ministry's committed approximately $1.5 million to develop a series of regional workshops on farm demonstrations and enhanced lines of communication to the sector to ensure our farmers and ranchers are in the best position possible to manage emerging drought conditions. And I just want to say, we did our engagement in the Westwood community just recently, and, you know, it went well. There was a lot of information passed, a lot of things that maybe had been previously misunderstood, but it was a very positive meeting. So we've had 30 different locations that we're in the process of visiting and engaging and teaching and communicating with, connecting with regional staff. So this is how we're trying to reach out to the farming community. Throughout the fall and winter of 2023, the ministry engaged with BC's agricultural associations on how the province can improve communications to both industry associations and agricultural producers. So this was part of the plan that was identified. And just as an aside, of course, you are aware of the drought infrastructure, the increase to the original announcement in 2023, $83 million to help farmers build infrastructure that will help them see through the rougher times in the coming summers to protect the sector. And, you know, I can say we are doing everything we can to assist the farmer because we recognize how serious drought can be.
Member from Kootenai East.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleague from Delta South for affording me just one question. And a question to the Minister, I don't think she would ever have anticipated coming to her ministry, and it's relating to chronic wasting disease. And I see some nods, so I think they know where I'm going with this. It's been identified in the southeast corner of the province. It's a neurological prion disease that affects cervids, which are moose, deer, elk. And it's a fatal disease, 100% fatal, and it's got the ability now to sweep right across British Columbia and greatly impact our cervid populations and all the associated industries and stakeholders that use our great outdoors. The testing is key. Getting the data on positive or negatives from cervids is absolutely key to keeping this in check. Formerly it was in Saskatchewan, was a testing center. Now it's being moved to the Ministry of Agriculture in Abbotsford, and we didn't net gain a lot of distance there because it's about as close to Saskatchewan as it is to Abbotsford in my corner of the province where ground zero is right now. The question to the Minister would be on priority. There's a lot of things going on in the Ministry of Agriculture, and this was something not probably anticipated a year ago, but here it is now. So the question to the Ministry is, where would the priority be for testing and getting that turnaround time? Because we need 2 to 3 weeks on this. I don't know if that's something that the Ministry's considered. Right now we're looking at 2 to 3 months. We need that to be shortened down. So the question to the Ministry is, where is the priority for CWD testing, and what would the anticipated turnaround time be for that testing?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, member, for raising this question. Just as, first off, Walrus is responsible, the different ministry. However, the chief vet is, that works for agriculture, is responsible for animal health, and she is deeply involved in this file. We're working with our colleagues at Walrus, with ways to improve the speed of testing, because we recognize the importance of this. So we are working diligently on this. So thank you for bringing it up.
Member for Kelowna West.
Thanks very much. Through the chair, I just want to, I know that the ministry has been quite active on the file with the damage that's happened throughout the province, but I want to specifically ask about the wineries. There's over 400 wineries in BC, which are the highest per capita winery area in Canada. The wine industry is in shambles after 3 years of back-to-back cold snaps, which decimated vines in the Okanagan. Red grape varieties are particularly impacted, with losses up to 98%. We will not understand the total impact of the loss, but we know grape growers' vines were cropped lighter than usual, contributing to the current estimates of about 15% of grape vines lost and 95% of the grape buds lost, which is massive. I understand about 40 or 30 million is going out for grape producers through production insurance and agri-stability in 2023, and the same number likely in 2024, which and there's been an increase of about 5 FTEs in the Kelowna area to support the claims and assessments. I'm just wondering if there will be rule changes to allow for grapes from out of province or country to be used over a period of time, and allowing for greater flexibility would allow or permit growers to source grapes from these outside of the current indicated region, vintage, or variety, as long as the quality standards are met. And I'm wondering if the ministry will help the wine industry, Mr. Chair, or the wine industry in this way.
Minister.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Member, I understand that you were briefed just recently on the wine sector and funding, et cetera, et cetera. But this particular question falls under Public Safety and Solicitor General. It's not under Agricultural Ministry. So it's probably best to ask the minister. However, we are working very closely with the ministry and the sector, and just as part of the replant program that we launched, there were funds set aside for the task force, and these kinds of questions are, I'm sure, are the kinds of things that they would likely be deliberating on. But I urge you to ask the question of PSSG when they're in estimates.
Member from Kelowna West.
Thank you, Chair. So just to be clear through to the ministry and the minister, is the ministry supportive of the idea, the concept?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, generally, we are supportive of the import of grapes as a stopgap measure. However, this is a complicated issue that involves industry and PSSG, and so I urge you to ask the question of the minister when they're doing the estimates.
Member Kelowna West.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the minister. I know that that support goes a long way. To be honest, I I think it'll be good for everybody, including yourself, with that support. I want to ask one other technical question, which I'll ask with the idea about the support. So to help the BC wine industry, BC United has asked the ministry to commit to ensuring that the Ministry of Finance extends the existing markup-free direct delivery for land-based wineries on grapes that are imported into British Columbia in the stopgap period that you just referred to. And if the ministry or the Ministry of Agriculture is supportive of that extension with whatever conditions are applied to it.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Member, I believe your question is best referred to the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of PSSG, so I really urge you to ask the questions to them. They're responsible.
Member Kelowna West.
Thank you again, Chair. Just to clarify, is the ministry supportive of us, of that approach? I realize there's a cost to government, and this is not in your budget, but are you supportive of this? Because I don't know if you've looked at the financial modeling, but the land-based wineries, which I think your ministry said 461, they're in a very tenuous financial position, and there's no coverage of any other sort for them to get through this.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. I have supported the sector in every way I can under my authority, and that's no secret. But I urge you to speak to the other ministries for issues under their authority. Thank you.
Members, Delta South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've only got, I think, 10 minutes left. So the $83 million, first of all, I can kind of lump a couple of things into one question. Where exactly did the $83 million come from? I don't think it was part of the agriculture budget. And so my question through you, Mr. Chair, of course, I've done some studying on this, the Ag Water Infrastructure Program to manage, collect, transport, and store water for irrigation purposes for agriculture. So through you, Mr. Chair, $83 million, how will these funds help provide reliable water supplies and curtail irrigation shutdowns at critical times of our growing season? And how long will farmers and ranchers have to wait to apply for and get grants to make a difference?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. The first question, a member, where did the 83 million come from? That's from contingencies from 23-24. You asked a question about how will it prevent shutdown and the farm infrastructure. Sorry. that, I'm mixing up the questions. So the farm infrastructure, they're on-farm infrastructure pieces, so they will prevent water shutdown because you'll have that storage on your farm that you can actually access if there is a shut off or shut down. And this last question was, how long will they have to wait? The applications for on-farm activities are open now. In fact, they were open the day that we made the announcement.
Member for Delta South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll try and wrap up here, I guess, unfortunately, but Mr. Chair, I think it was maybe 4 years ago at the BC Ag Council evening banquet next door at the Grand Pacific Hotel, where the Minister of Agriculture, the Solicitor General, and the Attorney General got up on a stage and said to the farmers in the room and the ranchers that we are going to, government will fix the Trespass Act and bring it more in line with other provinces of BC, because we have families that are scared to death of people coming onto their farms, invading their farms, sneaking into their barns at night. So my question is, being told 4 or 5 years ago by the Minister of Agriculture that the ministry will work with the Attorney General to strengthen our trespass laws, can you give me an idea of where that's at and if you've made some progress on that?
Minister.
Thank you. In my discussions with the sector, they have made it clear, you're absolutely right, member, that their objective is to have the government establish a set of rules that recognizes the biosecurity risks posed by extreme activists who would enter chicken barns or dairy barns. And what we're learning from the avian influenza outbreak is that biosecurity is critically important. And we need to ensure that everyone, farmers, consumers, and even protesters, recognize and respect this. To that end, I have directed staff to work on a legislative proposal that would give greater force of law to on-farm biosecurity zones. And that policy work is now underway, and I'll have more to share as we move forward.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that answer. Hopefully, I think I've asked the same question for 3 or 4 years now, so hopefully we can make some progress on this. We're going to really switch topics for a second. We're going to talk about bees. Now, with the cold snap that happened not only in the Fraser Valley but in the Okanagan, where it got down to -30, the use for pollination is really absolutely curtailed. So the people in the bee industry are saying they're going to be suffering financial, because there's orchards and blueberry farmers that are saying, I don't even need your hives this year. There's nothing much to pollinate. So the question is, through you, Mr. Chair, will there be ag recovery money for beekeepers due to their lost revenue for their pollination services?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Member, I appreciate the question, and because you've stimulated lots of conversation. Yes, there is coverage under the Agra stability, but our team is going to look into a little bit more for you, and we'll absolutely get back to you with respect to options. It's possible it might be under Agra recovery, but we want a little bit more time, and we'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm done. I'm going to turn things over. I just want to say sometimes I feel like I know the file quite well. I feel like I have to be, rather tough at times, which I don't like doing, but I appreciate you guys, putting up with me for a few hours and, at least answering questions. So thank you, Minister, and to your staff, and hopefully we can keep working on a good relationship.
Thank you very much, Member. Member for Saanich North and the Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nice to be here in agriculture. Just have a few questions here, the next half hour or so. Just around stop work orders and enforcement on ALR land, just to open with. Can the Minister explain the process for issuing and enforcing stop work orders on ALR land?
Minister.
Yes, thank you, Chair. To the member, the ALC, CAO basically, has just left, but she's coming back. Can you give me another question, and then we'll answer that question when she returns? Thank you so much.
Member.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just around water licensing, perhaps maybe the Minister can answer this question first. Whether or not the Minister will consider advocating for amnesty for farmers who didn't get water licenses, allowances for those farmers to use water for food production purposes, and to put them in the queue along with long-standing water users that didn't get their applications in before March 2022, to let them begin the application process ahead of new users.
Minister of Agriculture and Food.
Thank you so much, Chair. The decisions with respect to water licensing are made by statutory decision makers in the Walrus Ministry. So while I'm certain that you're not advocating for me to interfere in those decisions, I would encourage the member to raise these concerns in the ministry estimates. But I always advocate for farmers in whatever forum I find myself in. In fact, I believe so strongly in the need to ensure that farmers have access to water that I advocated with my colleagues to fund an $83 million expansion to the water infrastructure program so that farmers would be better equipped to manage drought in the coming years.
Member.
Yeah, thank you. I think what I'm advocating for is that when it comes to the mess that's been created going back now a couple of years, that yes, actually, that the Ministry of Agriculture does have something to say to the other ministries about accessing water for food production. We are in a increasingly increasing drought conditions. Our agricultural communities are having the same kind of access issues, and so to suggest that that the Ministry of Agriculture doesn't have something to say directly to the Walrus Ministry about this, I think, you know, I recognize that there's a statutory decision maker, but there's also a government that is responsible for those statutory decision makers. So I am indeed suggesting that the Minister of Agriculture does strongly advocate on behalf of farmers to ensure that they get their water licenses, because it actually amounts to food for British Columbians. I'm assuming that the ALC person is not here. Oh, okay. All right. So I'll sit down and, do you want me to ask the question again, or do you have? This is about, yeah, enforcement, issuing and enforcing stop work orders on ALR land.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair, and we'll go back to the first question. Thank you for your patience. Thank the member for their patience. Apologies. When the ALC receives a complaint, an officer conducts an inspection to document and confirm the existence of a violation or the potential for a violation of the ALC Act and its regulations. The majority of observed contraventions are dealt with through compliance actions issued by the ALC's officers, such as notices of contravention and direction letters to acquire voluntary compliance. They also serve as an important formal record of compliance and/or failure to comply. Enforcement measures available to the Commission include stop work orders, remediation orders, and administrative penalties. These enforcement tools, is that me? These enforcement tools can be levied concurrently. Non-compliance with an order of the commission is an offense, and monetary administrative penalties can be levied by the ALC, and failing that, the commission may apply to the Supreme Court for a compliance order under Section 53 of the ALC Act. Complicated.
Member.
Yeah, thank you. How many enforcement officers does the ALC currently have?
Minister.
6.
Thank you, Minister. Has there been or is there currently a gap in enforcement on Vancouver Island? I've been made aware that there's very little enforcement happening on Vancouver Island. I'm just wondering if you could provide the status locally here for us.
Minister.
Chair. Again, 6 is the number of enforcement officers, and there is no gap as there's an ability to move staff around the regions in British Columbia. And the ALC has not identified any lack of coverage.
Member.
Okay. Thank you. Can the minister explain her approach to ensuring the balance between the purpose of the agricultural land reserve, the removal of agricultural land for non-agricultural purposes, particularly as it relates to the rising food insecurity and concerns around the impacts, even temporary, of removals on agricultural production?
Minister?
Thank you, Chair. This question, member, was canvassed earlier, and in a nutshell, land use decisions involve trade-offs. And as Minister of Agriculture, I always advocate to protect farmland, but there are trade-offs and other competing interests at times, which have to be part of the decision.
Member?
Thank you. Can the minister describe the relationship the ALC has with the BC Energy Regulator?
Minister?
Thank you, Chair. Member, there is a delegation agreement between the BC Energy Regulator and the Agricultural Land Commission, which is designed to allow the BC Energy Regulator to work efficiently and effectively in its efforts to regulate the oil and gas industry, particularly in the northeast, and to ensure that BC's agricultural values are protected.
House Leader, third party.
Yeah, thank you. Is it the responsibility of the BC Energy Regulator to be considerate of the agricultural values? Or is it the role of the BC Energy Regulator to be considerate of the needs of the energy regulating in the province?
Minister?
Through Chair. I believe that the decisions being made under the agreement attempt to strike that balance between the needs of the oil and gas sector while preserving the integrity of the ALR. I can also tell the member that the ALC and the BC Energy Regulator are currently working together to establish baseline information about the effectiveness of mitigation measures.
House Leader, third party.
I would say that I'll ask the question. Has the minister been up to the northeast to see for herself the impact of the decisions that the BC Energy Regulator is making with respect to agricultural land, water storage facilities on agricultural land, the development of gas production facilities, fracking sites, and the storage of used frack water on agricultural land? Has the minister been up north to witness that for herself? Through you, Mr.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did visit the Northeast. And I visited and talked to a number of farmers. And really, we spoke about their everyday challenges. And that includes things like the cost of production, drought, water storage, a multitude of issues. So yes, I've been up.
House Leader, third party.
Okay, great. Then I think that perhaps then the minister and I have different perspectives on the balance that the minister asked about, because what I saw was the significant reduction in the production of the land where the pipelines run, for example. They crisscross those lands all over the place. We see pipes, temporary pipes hijacking water and putting it on and storing it on agricultural land for it to be used. Hear stories about gas processing facilities that have been built without permit on agricultural land. Has the minister done a review to ensure that the balance actually is in favor of agricultural production, not the production of gas? Since the delegation agreement has been made, has there been a review to ensure that this ministry and this minister is actually indeed looking out for the interests of agriculture, which is the job, and not just allowing oil and gas to run roughshod over that land?
Minister.
Thank you so much, Chair. As I said before, the ALC and the BC energy regulators are currently working together to establish baseline information about the effectiveness of mitigation measures. And the results of this work will give us a better picture of how that balance is going.
Member. This delegation agreement has been in place for several years. It's frankly surprising that this isn't something that's built into the agreement on an ongoing basis, rather than a process that the minister is describing as something that is in the process of being developed. I feel that it is a dereliction of the duty of the agriculture ministry to allow another industry to run roughshod over it. I mean, indeed, this was the government that created the Agricultural Land Commission back in 1972, celebrated it every year since then, and yet created a delegation agreement that allows another industry to literally destroy agricultural land without the basic measures in place to be able to understand what the impact of that is and to put in place the appropriate mitigation measures. Anywhere else in this province, if you were to do it, unless you're building a Red Bull facility in the Lower Mainland, anywhere else in this province would require you to at least put the same amount of land back into the agricultural land reserve that you're pulling out in order to use for a different purpose other than agriculture. And anybody who pretends that what they see up there is going to be is the level of production and the quality of the land and the quality of the air in those food producing lands, it's a hallucination to believe that there's not a massive impact on the agricultural capacity of that land. I got time for one more question here, and I just want to ask about the minister's role, or how the minister sees her role in standing up for and defending Indigenous food sources and Indigenous food production. And we have a long history in this province where the Agriculture Ministry favors Western agricultural and food production practices. We've got a scenario on the coast here, for an example, just right out here outside of, in my riding, for shellfish production was an aquaculture. The Coast Salish people were engaged for hundreds, thousands of years in aquaculture production, which would fit the mold of Western agricultural practices. We have, for the vast majority of the history of this province, seen these Crown governments engaged in what is environmental racism, where Indigenous food production is overlooked in favor of clear-cutting forests, spraying of glyphosate, removing food sources, removing medicine sources. The ability for forage and harvesting of natural foods of Indigenous people have been utterly destroyed, both by herbicide and by mechanical destruction. What is the minister's role in advocating on behalf of Indigenous food sources in light of the Declaration Act with the other ministries, including probably Walrus and including the Ministry of Forests? What role has the minister taken in that, in being a strong advocate for Indigenous people?
Minister.
Thank you so much. Oh, welcome, Chair. With respect to First Nations, the member will recall that we have established an Indigenous Advisory Council that provides advice and insights to the ministry with respect to First Nations agriculture, food security, and food sovereignty. And this is the only one in existence in Canada, so we're very proud. In addition, we established a $30 million fund with a new relationship trust aimed specifically at supporting those objectives with First Nations. And I believe these two processes will make a significant impact on furthering the objectives of increasing First Nations food sovereignty and security in British Columbia. And I just want to give you an update on the grants that have been applied for. So I'm pleased to note that the initial intake of our $30 million New Relationship Trust program was successful, with 70 applications being approved for a total amount of $10,702,470. And a second intake is planned for May this year, and a third intake is spring of 2025. And I just want to say that I'm extremely grateful for all the learning that I have personally done, and just really happy to be part of that process.
Member.
Thank you. I just have one more question, but I do want to make a comment here. It's a pretty lonely experience to be standing on a beach and recognizing that there's not anybody around, nobody at the federal government, nobody at the provincial government that's really willing to protect those spaces for the food production that happens there naturally, and that has been entirely obliterated by forestry practices, by land use practices such as septic tanks, and the food sovereignty, the Indigenous food sovereignty program that the minister just responded to was I appreciate but the spirit of the question was around, do we have a Minister of Agriculture who's an advocate for a broader context of food than the Western perspective? Do we have a Minister of Agriculture that's standing up to the Minister of Forests and saying, we just can't continue to destroy all these places that Indigenous people see as places to harvest food and medicines? To the Minister of Water and Land, and saying, we just can't continue to destroy all these places without putting it in place. And that's what I got back was not an encouraging response, that there's an advocate. There's not a powerful advocate against the BC energy regulator, who is taking up an extraordinary amount of land and destroying it on behalf of oil and gas, not on behalf of agriculture. There's not a powerful advocate for Indigenous food sources and food foraging and harvesting in the natural spaces. We have other ministries just destroying it as these food sources as problem species, as impediments, because they're not conifers. Mowing them down, either by mechanical or by the Indigenous food sovereignty program at $30 million outward facing is not the work that I was asking about, which is an inward facing, powerful advocate to the other ministries who are destroying our food harvesting locations. So that, I think that as we look forward, that's what Indigenous people need from the Minister of Agriculture. I'll just end with this final question, then I'll hand it over to my colleague. The federal government just announced a national food program for our schools. When you take a look at the numbers, it's dramatically less than what's needed in order to deliver a universal food program. Can I get the assurance of the minister that whatever British Columbia's contribution, or whatever Ottawa's contribution to British Columbia is, will be added on top of what the provincial government is already making to the food program in our schools, and not deleted from the provincial contribution.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome. The decision on the funding that you've asked about rests with the Ministry of Education and Childcare and Finance, and I suggest in the estimates time you talk to them about that particular one. Thank you.
Just before the member rises to ask another question, we'll take a 10-minute recess, and we will be back at 10:02. Okay, we'll call the committee back to order, and we were just about to hear from the member from Parksville Qualicum.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a few questions to the Minister of Agriculture. On Vancouver Island in the 1950s, we had about 85% of our food production came from on the island. Now that number, it's difficult to know, but it's definitely not 85%. We're looking at 5 or 10% in some areas. It's a significant challenge when we talk about resiliency locally, ensuring that food prices are stable, but also some exciting initiatives with regenerative agriculture. We're missing out, especially in communities like Parksville Qualicum. Most of my questions will relate to local issues, but the first is just setting that baseline of how much of our agricultural land is being used right now for agriculture. Looking through the Revitalizing the Agricultural Land Reserve and the Agricultural Land Commission report of 2018, one of the goals was to establish the agricultural land use inventory. That report from 2018 said that we would be at 100% by 2021. Looking through the minister's estimates process, it looks like we're still a long ways away from that being completed. Through the chair to the minister, can I get an update as far as where this process is at, how much land is currently in inventory, and what are the timelines for the completion of this project?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. A member. We've just finished the Lower Mainland, and we will be completing this fall the Thompson-Okanagan region. The entire process will be complete, fingers crossed, end of 2025. And the reason that it is taking some time is that it is super labor intensive and that we verify our imagery with staff on the ground.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. That's great. That's a bit ahead of schedule as far as the report. I didn't hear the percentage from Vancouver Island, so I'll come back to that. So it's important not just to maintain our current agricultural capacity, but also to ensure that we have new blood coming into the sector. Just wondering through the chair to the minister, if the minister could explain some of the initiatives underway, especially in central Vancouver Island, as far as whether it's young agrarians or other projects to get more land under production in my community and in neighboring communities.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. To support the next generation of farmers and those who are interested in pursuing a career in agriculture, my ministry has dedicated a dedicated youth development staff team who deliver programs with partner organizations such as 4-H British Columbia and the BC Agriculture in the Classroom Foundation to help inspire the next generation to consider career opportunities in agriculture and agri-food processing. And these programs for children and youth focus on topics including agriculture and agri-food job opportunity awareness and hands-on agricultural skill building and career readiness. Farming is a difficult profession and one that can force out prospective and new farmers. To provide new farmers with the necessary tools for success and secure our food supply for the future, my ministry partners with the BC Young Farmers to deliver the Young and New Entrant Skill Development Program, a cost-shared funded program that supports knowledge-based events, conferences, seminars, and training. This program supports new entrants and young farmers to build capacity and promote leadership in agribusiness skills in multiple commodities across British Columbia. And these are just a few of the examples that we are using, but I would be happy to sit down with you and we'll go into your specific region and your area and talk about the things that are working in your region.
Member.
I appreciate that, through the chair to the minister. I do appreciate that, and I will certainly take the minister up on that offer. I'm aware of the Young Agrarians program and the matching program. We've got lots of agricultural land in our community that is significantly underutilized, with some property owners that are looking to match with that next generation of farmers. So it's exciting to see that. It's a bit slow going, but of course there's significant costs, not just to land, but equipment and training and whatnot. I guess the next question I have is, has been asked already. I was hoping to mention the BC Ag, the new producer program, just some of the challenges. When people are looking into this program, it's difficult because they don't announce it, they announce it, but they don't collect a list, they don't notify people. There's a bit of lack of transparency there, and so it's not a question, I'll just throw that to the minister as a concern that I've heard from folks that are looking at going into that program. Some years they don't even do it at all. I know I reached out to them a little while back asking if there was going to be an entry this year, and the response was, well, we can't tell you because that might give you an advantage in the application process. It's a very strange system for folks that don't know how that works, and some extra transparency there would certainly be appreciated. I want to talk about water. In the rain shadow of Mount Arrowsmith, we are looking up at the snowpack and seeing the same thing that we see across the province. Last year was very difficult. We had some farms that have always struggled with water use, access to water, and they are looking at this year as potentially being much worse. Now, I recognize fully the minister has said that this, the well application process is through Waterland Resource Stewardship. My question is, what is the minister doing, especially in communities like mine that's going to see significant drought again this year? What is the ministry and the minister doing to ensure that farmers have access to water?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. On March 18th, this government provided $83 million to increase BC farmers' ability to adapt to drought and flooding. This includes support for more efficient irrigation technology and infrastructure to improve water availability and storage, which will benefit stream flows, fish populations, and support more sustainable food production. The Agriculture Water Infrastructure Program, which we launched last June, has already funded 108 projects ranging from water storage, like agricultural dams and dugouts, to improved water supply systems for irrigation and livestock, and we expect to fund another 600 projects to help our food producers capture, store, and irrigate more efficiently. This program provides financial incentives for the agriculture sector to invest in water infrastructure for adaptation in anticipation of climate change. Eligible costs include rehabilitation, expansion or new construction of water storage systems, improvement, expansion, or new construction of conveyance and water supply systems to farms, as well as agricultural water supply assessments, engineering studies, or plans. And in addition, we've got a couple of other programs, the Extreme Weather Preparedness for Agriculture program, which we launched in June of 2023, and the Forage and Climate Change Risk Assessment Tool under development as another program which also helps farmers better prepare for the drought season.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. And those programs for those farmers who apply for those, I'm sure, are very much appreciated. Is there any work in the ministry that is ensuring that, so this is for on-site storage, on-site irrigation, reduce, you switch from spray to drip lines or whatever it is to reduce the overall water usage, but that relies on actually being able to get water from your well or from your region. In my community, we're looking at English and River every year, and every summer it's going down and down. And so I'm wondering if the minister could clarify on any work that's being done, whether directly or advocacy to other ministries, to ensure that there is water, not just reducing use on site and providing grants to better utilize that water, but to ensure that there's actually water going to be available regionally to ensure that these farmers have access to water.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. The on-farm program is open now, but we are actively consulting with industry to allocate funds for larger projects to ensure that regional capacity. And these projects will be in partnership with regional districts, municipalities, First Nations, and irrigation districts.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. My last question is related to, and we've heard this before about some of the challenges with compliance. The Agricultural Land Commission has their investigative body. We heard from the minister, I believe there were 6 investigators across the province. We have a property in my constituency on Parker Road that has been regularly a perennial topic of conversation through my office. We get lots of emails about it. The property is within the Agricultural Land Reserve. It's a large property. There's what looks to all intents and purposes to be a junkyard. There are hundreds of vehicles on site. There are new vehicles that tend to show up. The Agricultural Land Commission's been informed many times. There's a fish-bearing stream, and there is significant soil deposits that are taking place to the point where I'm hearing complaints from a neighbor about the impacts on their well. Through the chair to the minister, just wondering if the minister is aware of this particular property, and if so, what remedial action is being taken to ensure that this property is cleaned up for current and future farming activities.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Remember, I'm not aware of this specific parcel that you're speaking to, but I would be happy to receive more information. So if you could perhaps give us more info, not today necessarily, but it would be, we could follow up for you. So the full address, et cetera, et cetera.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly won't put the address on through the estimates process, but I appreciate the opportunity from the minister to do that. I will have that to her office within the next 15 minutes. And I just want to thank the minister and her staff for all the great answers and attention to this. Farming and agriculture is hugely important, and so I appreciate this.
And members, seeing no further questions, I ask the minister if they would like to make any closing remarks. If you like.
I thought that, okay. Well, I just want to say thank you for all the great questions. It's been a wonderful exercise for all of us, and I certainly learn every time, so I really appreciate the questions. I actually enjoy it. And so thank you for patience, and you've been at it a long time, and I haven't been at it as long, but certainly enjoying the ministry very, very much. It's a really fabulous file, so it's great. So thank you for all those that participated, and thank you to the key folks here behind me who participated in the exercise with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you all members. Seeing no further questions, I will now call the vote. Shall vote 12 pass? Aye. Any opposed? Carried. And I'll ask the minister to now move the next vote.
Vote number 13. Resolved that the sum not exceeding $5,453,000 be granted to His Majesty to defray the expenses of the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Agricultural Land Commission to the 31st of March 2025.
Thank you, Minister and members. Shall vote 13 pass? Aye. Anyone opposed? Carried. And now, I'll ask the minister to move the next motion.
Honorable Chair, I move that the committee rise and report resolution and completion and ask leave to sit again.
And the question has been called. Members, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And the motion is carried. And thank you, members. This committee stands adjourned. I'll ask the members to be on call in case the House Leader decides that we're going to be coming back here with the next bill, but stay tuned.